Thanks, Riley and Jacob. Did I get the names right? Jaden. Yeah. Started with J. Thanks and good evening, everybody. And thanks for having me along. Are my slides up? Yes, they are. So we're good to go. Can you hear me if I walk away from the mic? That mic? Yeah? All good, Bradley? Yep. Yeah. All right. So obviously tonight we're going to be looking at this theme of example in Word. Now this, I think, is the first of Southern for 2021, which is under the broader banner of the passages in 1 Timothy 4, where Paul is exhorting Timothy to basically focus on the example he presents to people around him. So I gather the talks are sort of taken from those verses and particular aspects of what Timothy is being told to do around this theme of presenting a good example. And it's interesting, I wasn't going to say this, but talking to Steve Brumby, who's gone, there you are, just before he sort of pointed out that, a nice practical point in terms of building the case for why this is probably a pretty good theme for young people, any people really, is that, just imagine if we were always conscious, front of mind, every day we wake up and we're thinking about, wow, I'm on show, I've got to be a good example, even just from a preaching point of view, how that would potentially temper and improve our behaviour. It'd be a really helpful thing to do, but of course we don't always remember that, and so we, sometimes do the wrong thing, but it would be a really good thing, and I think builds a good case for the theme that you've got to enjoy this year. In terms of tonight, sort of narrowing down to our theme, this example in Word, I guess to pique your interest around that, to build the case for that, what I thought we'd think about is what we just read, which is James chapter 3, because I think in a way you could argue that is what James is doing in that passage. It's kind of negative, it's got a pretty strong warning theme, but he is trying to build a case. He's not just being negative to, the tongue's really, bad. He's doing it for a positive reason, and he's trying to essentially say, you need to take this thing of speech and the tongue pretty seriously. And he does that, and I just sort of raise this, just again, to introduce the topic. He sort of presents to us, as I look at it, if you dissect that passage we just read, he's putting these two kind of ingredients of what you might call a bit of a lethal cocktail together. The first ingredient is in verses 3 to 5, where he pretty much is trying to point out to us that the tongue has what I would call disproportionate power. Okay, so on a physical level, it's just a little tongue, there's not much to it. But his argument is it is disproportionately powerful, extremely powerful in relation to what it is on a physical level. So, and he sort of underlines his point by making three analogies, like his half-brother, the Lord Jesus Christ, like Solomon, another master teacher. He loves to use natural examples to make his points, and so, this is what he does. He says, look, think about a horse. A horse is a powerful beast, powerful animal. They can be kind of almost arrogant by personality, pretty tough to control. You put a bridle, harness, bridle, I'm not a horse person, harness, bridle over a horse. Any horse people here? No? I have ridden a horse. I like riding horses, but I'm bad at it. Anyway, you put a harness and a bridle over a horse, and in someone who's semi-capable, and you can control the horse relatively well. It almost doesn't make sense. He then points out a boat. He said, same idea. You've got a helm, you've got the wheel, which is sort of what you saw on the opening slide. You've got a rudder, little old rudder, and you've got this enormous seagoing vessel in some cases, and just by turning the wheel, just a sort of rotation of the arm, you can shift this massive thing, an crude oil super tanker, for example, if you want to go to that extreme, and you can spin it around with just a couple of twists of your arm. It is disproportionately powerful. He says, again, that is what the tongue is like. And then finally, he uses the example of fire, which is kind of topical in terms of what happened up in the hills 2 or 3 weeks ago. Anyone affected by that? Anyone live up in the hills? Nobody lives in the hills. I live in the hills. Oh, here we go. Were you in the area where the fire happened? What's that? You could see it, yeah. We saw some smoke too. I think people could see smoke down here sometimes better than the people up there. But yeah, we were like right on the edge because we were on the right side of the freeway, so it wasn't too bad. But you know, it was a little bit scary there for a period. And allegedly, that was an individual, for why, of course, we've got no idea, but decided to, an arsonist decided to light it up. And you can see, and that didn't even get that bad. You know, some fires get absolutely catastrophic. Just destroy thousands of homes, kill hundreds of people, that sort of thing. So that didn't even go that far, but you know, you get a taste from what just happened up in the hills the other day as to what James is talking about. Again, it is disproportionate power. So that's his first point. We've got this thing that is disproportionately powerful, and then just to kind of rub salt in the wound, he says, and unfortunately, nobody can control it. Nobody in this hall, I don't even know some of you, I've never probably even seen some of you before. I can guarantee you are incapable, as I am utterly incapable, of controlling my tongue. I know that because James says so, and it's the inspired word of God, but I know it from experience as well. Sometimes hard experience. It is extremely difficult to control our tongues. You know, I mean, hands up, who's on top of their, controlling their tongue? Nobody. That was a rhetorical question. No, of course, nobody is on top of controlling the tongue. And James confidently asserts that in this passage. And so what you've got is this dilemma as to disproportionately powerful, cannot be controlled. Now he's got our interest, okay? This warrants our attention because, of course, God didn't give us a tongue to be all negative about it and say, oh, well, I give up. He gave us we're going to see this tonight. The tongue is something that can be used for enormous good, to build people up and express love and all these sorts of wonderful things. But if we don't pay attention to it, we can get ourselves in a lot of trouble. No man can tame it. It's a word. It's sort of like, I don't know, you think about, you got a detonator for a nuclear missile and you give it to a toddler, right? You would not expect good results. And it's a little bit like that. God giving us a tongue is a little bit like that. This is disproportionately powerful thing. And he knows we're not very good. We're not going to go well. But there's enough good in it, there's enough potential in it that he still thinks it's worth giving us a tongue. Okay? So that's kind of the dilemma. And that's why I think, a topic like tonight, thinking about it in the context, just speech generally, in the context particularly of being a good example, and we are going to look at that. We're going to touch a little bit on preaching and how other people look at us. It's really important, and it's a good topic to think about. Okay, so in terms of structure, pretty simple structure tonight. There's kind of too much written in the Bible, in my opinion, to cover everything. I don't think it would be practical to go through every single occurrence of the tongue. So I thought what we would do is I picked a few, first negative, we'll start negative, we'll go positive. Kind of first, a few challenges that are put to us in the Bible that I think are particularly practical and maybe difficult, but things you pretty much see just about day to day or week to week. That are good for us to think about, good to look at what the scriptures say about how we should view those things and deal with them. So we'll deal with a few negatives, and then we'll sort of finish up on a few more positive things as to, it's all very well to say, well, what don't we do with our tongue? What is the wrong way to use it? But we need to focus, of course, on what is the good things to do with it, because just trying to sit there and not say anything bad isn't the answer, right? It's about using it to say good things. So that's pretty much our structure tonight. And what I'm going to do is I sometimes like to use pictures, like you saw the wheel. I'm going to sort of use a picture to help, or a photo to help us remember the point. And I don't know if anyone will be game enough to answer, but I'll get you to try and guess why I put up a particular photo in relation to the tongue. So, first negative theme, this is actually really difficult. I actually know the names of a few people here, so I can pick up. Bradley's looking down. I think we're cousins-in-law, aren't we? You should be helping me out. So, first negative, macaron. What do you think that might have to do with a negative application of the tongue? And it is quite difficult. In fact, it's almost impossible. So, but if anyone can have a go. You look like you want to have a guess, but you're not going. Yeah, it's quite hard. All right. First topic is gossip, right? So gossip, stabbing people in the back, that sort of thing. This is a problem. Solomon has a lot to say about it in the Proverbs, but he's not the only one in the Bible who talks about it. Very practical thing, very real issue, very tempting, and again, can pretty much guarantee we've all gotten into this at some point or another. You go to the supermarket, you see these magazines, and their whole business is built on gossip. Right? I think they're called gossip magazines, aren't they? Their whole business model is gossip, and it's pretty lucrative. There's some pretty successful gossip magazines, and and there they are when you go to buy something to check out, and they've got some headline, and you might not even know or care about the person, but there's sort of party that says, "Oh, gee, what have they done? Wow!" Yeah. Because it's bait, right? Gossip is bait, and that's and Solomon, he is a master teacher, and he points this out to us in Proverbs 18, verse 8. KJV isn't the best translation for this one, but it is there when you look at other translations. The words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly. Brilliant, brilliant way of summing up the concept of gossip, okay? What he is saying, he's kind of calling us out on, I know why you like gossip. Or in fact, just you do like gossip. I don't know why. Because it's tasty. It feels good. You like it, right? So he's getting to the root of why people love gossip, because it is like a lovely, if you like macarons. I don't know if you like macarons, but it's just like a tasty morsel, bite size, a bit of chocolate, whatever. Because we like to gossip. We like to hear. There's something kind of. It makes us feel good about ourselves to listen to people say something bad about someone else. It sort of puts us on a pedestal, right? Every time we say nasty things about other people, it has various benefits from a fleshly point of view. One of them is it essentially elevates us, right? If I'm saying how bad this person is, naturally, I am superior to them, right? So gossip, which tends to be negative, tends to be about dragging up negative things about other people, often not that well founded in the facts, not that well researched, second, third, fourth, fifth hand, but who cares? It's really interesting. That is gossip, and Solomon says, oh, it's tasty, but it's bad. And you just look at the rest of the book of Proverbs, and he absolutely goes to town on it. He does not like gossip, and but he tells us, I know why you like it. Okay, I mentioned backbiting. So variation on a theme. This is David now, of course, in Psalm 15, verse 1. This is a sort of one of those quotable quotes a lot of us might be familiar with. Essentially, he's in this psalm, he's introducing the sort of person that will be in the kingdom, that will be in God's tabernacle, and the sort of person that won't be in the kingdom or God's tabernacle. And this is one of the characteristics, as it were. If you don't want to be in the kingdom, backbite, because that's a hallmark of someone who won't be in the kingdom. Backbiting. So it's a bit of an old English phrase. In sort of modern vernacular, maybe we'd say like backstabbing. Backstabbing, slander, it's a more sort of legal term. Defamation, that's a really legal term. They're all kind of the same thing. But I think the layman's term is backstabbing. In Australia, backstabbing. This practice, again, it's sort of close cousins to gossip. It feels pretty good. The benefits of backstabbing are we get to elevate ourselves at someone else's expense, and they don't even have to know about it. So it doesn't even involve any modicum of courage or anything, right? So it's got a pretty good marketing pitch, and it's not therefore surprising that we sometimes find ourselves doing it or listening to someone else doing it and perhaps enjoying it. But the kicker is, says David, if you don't want to be in the kingdom, that's where you're heading. When I behave like that, when you behave like that, that's what we are signing up for. It is just bad news, right? Because, of course, God doesn't want people who are ripping people down behind their back. Criticising someone to their face, there's good and bad ways of doing that, but at least to their face is a good start, right? Matthew 18 talks about that. But behind the back, how on earth is that meant to help them? How could we claim, if I say something bad about you behind your back, Bradley, I'm saying to your face at least. How is that helping? How is that helping him? Of course, that's not helping him, right? My motivation is not to help him. It's to feel good about myself. Right? So backbiting is problematic. So we don't want to get into that. Having said that, I just want to make one last point. I think it's this fantastic practical point that Solomon makes again, in a different book this time, in the book of Ecclesiastes, about this problem, where it pretty much deals with the issue of, well, how are you going to react when you find yourself on the receiving end of this? Okay, because we'll all be on the receiving end of this. Sooner or later, well, it probably happens to us more often than we'd like to think, that someone's saying something bad about us behind our back, but occasionally a little birdie says, tells, and we actually find out, and we get livid, right? Well, that might be the natural reaction. And, you could reasonably feel entitled, especially if it's not true. Even if it is true, how is that constructive, right? If it's untrue, that's even worse, right? And I can think of a couple of times where it's happened to me. It didn't make me feel good, I can tell you that. But Solomon basically says, be careful. Be careful about how you react when you inevitably find out someone's been doing this to you, because you know what he says? If you're a backstabber's victim, take heed and to the words that are spoken, lest thou hear thy servant curse thee, for oftentimes also thine own heart knoweth that thou thyself likewise hast cursed others. So what he basically says is, this isn't justifying the behaviour, but it's saying, and again, he's like James. He's pretty much, he's saying, I know you've all done it. He knows we've all done it, or will do it. We're a future to this being written, but yeah, you may not do it as bad as that, sure, but you have done it. You have done it. So don't get all precious when you find out that someone has done it to you, because you have done it too, if you're honest with yourself, okay? It's a really good practical point just to temper our reaction to that problem, because we will be on the receiving end of it. It's not nice. Might be a Christadelphian. Oh, Christadelphians shouldn't do that. They say they're followers of Christ. Oh, don't worry about it. Christadelphians are completely imperfect. It will happen. But be honest about our own behaviour and try and just move on. Okay, can't let things like that eat us up. Okay, so that's macaron. That's the problem of gossip. Second photo, snake, maybe a bit easier. I actually asked one of my children this, and they got it right. They actually got a better version of this than I did. I'm not going to use it for what he said, but I'll tell you what he said in a minute. There's a couple of different ways of looking at a snake. What do you reckon a snake could mean in the context of, again, misuse of the tongue? What do you reckon I'm using that to represent? Lying. That's what George said. Yeah, that's what my son said, which is actually a better answer than mine. Yeah. So that is probably a pretty good symbol of lying, because Genesis 3, the serpent tells lies. It's not what I want to use it for, though. So I want to use it for a different thing, which is the issue of, and it would be a good topic, right? Lying. I sort of alluded to it in the gossip section, so I didn't want to labour it too much. But yes, that is another problem. We should try and tell the truth. That's a problem when we lie or tempted to lie. But I want to talk about it more in terms of something that I think is probably even more prevalent than lying, and that's why I chose it. Harder not to do, which is just, again, in the Australian vernacular, whinging, complaining, whining. And the snake picture is I thought of that because of the story of Numbers 21, and this is a culmination of the wilderness wanderings, right? What was one of the key themes of the wilderness wanderings, the almost top of the list problem? They just whinged and whined and complained and grumbled. And in the end, that was pretty much the headline reason that God wiped out a generation, right? So, if you sort of want to, if you think it's like a tier 3 sin, or that's not too bad, well, the wilderness wanderings, the Pentateuch, the records of that would suggest it's not. God really has a problem when we whinge and whine about things. And of course, the reason I put snake up is because in that Numbers 21 record, they're whinging and getting into Moses and God and the food and the everything, and God's just had enough at this point, and it's like he decides to give them a taste of their own medicine, and he sends in the snakes. And it's like the snakes are spitting the venom that they'd been spitting at God and Moses for months and years. And enough was enough. And people lost their lives over that. And of course, the brazen serpent stood up, and it's a nice type of Christ and all that sort of thing. But on a simple, practical level, it is a story that using snakes essentially is an indictment on the practice of grumbling and whinging and whining. Okay. There's a lead-up event to that, which also kind of epitomises it, which I'll just briefly mention, which is number 16, which is, some of you might be familiar with Dathan, Abiram and Korah. They were sort of leaders in the ecclesia, if you like, back then. They couldn't stand Moses, they couldn't stand Aaron. They thought that Moses and Aaron just wanted to be the boss, which they didn't. They'd been appointed by God. Of course, Dathan, Abiram and Korah actually wanted to be the boss. And they undermined and wide-handed them, backstabbed to our previous point, and they grumbled. And Jude characterises them as malcontent. Okay, it's really powerful language that Jude uses. Grumbling, malcontented people. That was the characteristic of Dathan, Abiram, and Korah, and a whole bunch of people that got into that with them. And again, it was brutal consequences for them, just like later in Numbers 21. God dealt swiftly with this problem of, whinging, pretty much what we would call whinging. And then, Numbers 21 there, spake against God, and, we know what happened. The snakes came, and it was pretty brutal at that point. So, this I think is a pretty practical thing, even, ecclesially. I don't know. You might even not like how they do things at Southern. I don't know. You might not like the program this year, or you might not like Cumberland Hall, or you might not like the committee. I don't know. You might not like your boss at work. Now that's a pretty common complaint, right? You might not like a teacher. A sibling, a parent, whatever. And so to whinge, and it relates pretty much to the previous topic, right? Backbone. And so we whinge and we whine and we complain because, of course, we are right and they are wrong. Always, of course, we're always right and they're wrong. Sometimes we are, but maybe not always. We've got a bit of a bias there. And so we just feel it is appropriate for us to unload, because why not? They deserve it, right? So we do it. But when you look at the wilderness wanderings, great example that puts it all in perspective, that God really, he doesn't like it when we do that, okay? And it's really hard not to do. I do it too often myself. I reckon I did it today at work. I'm pretty sure I did. It is very hard not to do. But the benchmark is the benchmark. We've got to try. We've got to try not to go there. Okay. Lucky last. Now this is the easiest one to guess. In the negatives, what do you think I'm going to talk about here in terms of negative usage of the tongue? This isn't trick. This is easy. Go on. You look like you're going. What do you think? Toilet talk. Perfect. 10 out of 10. Okay. Foul language, innuendo, borderline language, borderline stories, jokes, pretty common in this Australian culture. It's a simple thing. It is a simple thing, but it's it's pretty common, right? Hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully not amongst young people, I don't know. But in the world, I grew up in the world, and I can tell you, I swore like a trooper, right? Everybody swore like a trooper because that's just what you do. There's nothing wrong with it, okay? I don't swear like a trooper now, but I did. It is extremely common. Different context. I find at work, some circles do, some don't. Maybe it depends. People don't want to look unprofessional, but basically, people swear. My kids, they don't go to Heritage at this point. They go to Crayford's Primary, and they're always telling me how, not always, but they have told me how, in like a year 2 class, the kids will just be rattling off these really bad words. And I wouldn't, you wouldn't say Crayford's Primary wouldn't be sort of like considered a real marginal bad school, right? It's pretty on the surface nice school, but I hear that and I think, what? How old is it? What's year 2? 6? I don't know, 7. And they're swearing like troopers. It's bizarre. Where do they get that from? Where do you reckon a 7-year-old, 6-year-old, 5-year-old learns that from? Well, their peers or their parents, presumably, right? But my point is, it is everywhere, all around us. And, if anyone sort of tries to say something to you like, oh, well, the disciples were in the boat and they swore, well, maybe they, pre-conversion, they swore by the temple or that sort of thing. I don't necessarily think the Bible says that you can swear post-conversion or lead up to, or if you've got a conscience. I don't think, in the sense we use swearing, obscene language. I think that's just a silly interpretation of the Bible. And if you've got any doubt about that, Colossians 3 verse 8, for example, by now you must, this is the ESV, you must put them away, anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Very simple, right? It's a nice translation, generally, the ESV, and sometimes it really captures these things well, right? Obscene talk, point blank. Just don't talk like that. Those words are not for us. Those borderline conversations. Then crude joking gets a bit grayer. What's crude joking? I don't know. You need to use your conscience. I need to use my conscience. Okay. But if in doubt, we leave it out. Just don't go into, don't dance on the cliff's edge. Don't talk in the grey bands. It's not for us. Yes, it is prevalent out there. Yes, it is everywhere. Yes, I hear it at work all the time. I'm guessing you hear it, here and there. Sure, but we don't need to participate. That is not a good way to use our tongue. And I'm going to talk about, in the positives, sort of the last point, I'm going to talk a bit about preaching, and in the brief I got, Gus sort of put a thing around, talk a little bit about how I came into the truth and how speech played a role, and it did, and I will talk about that. But sort of related to that, I just want to make the point at this juncture around, my experience is that people are watching, even though you may not think people are watching, once people realise that you are religious or you claim to be religious, they are watching you like a hawk, okay? And they are watching what you say. And they kind of, perhaps some people want to see you slip up. And I know that from personal experience because I remember not long after coming into the truth, I was in Perth working, and just a simple thing, I just dropped a cup in the tea room, and I didn't swear, but I just said, I went, like that. And someone, it seems like a bit of a weird thing, but anyway, it sort of comes out the hall and walks down and says, you swore! It's like, as if, gotcha. And I said, no, I didn't, I just cried out. I said, no, I thought you might have swore, back in the office. So people are watching, right? Maybe that person was a bit weird, maybe everyone's not quite that weird, but, people are watching, right? And they do notice, I notice it. I notice people at work because it's a minority who don't swear. I do notice it. And I'm not saying it makes us, super righteous, if and all that sort of thing, but it's a pretty good start, isn't it? And it's not a great start if we're swearing like a trooper and we're saying, I'm a disciple of Christ and, I don't like filthiness or obscene talking. And then we do the opposite. So it's sort of a subtle way of witnessing because I find people do notice it. Even if you don't say anything else, that sort of sticks out a bit. So yeah, it's a practical thing. That was a picture of a coffee cup in case I forgot to talk about the coffee cup. All right, positives. We're going to talk about 3 positives now, because as I said, yes, we've talked about negatives, and dare I say, you could probably do the whole Southern 2021 on speech and the tongue. There are that many negatives, and there's quite a few positives too. But we just want to kind of keep it balanced, and so we'll leave it with those ones and get on to a few positives, of which this is the first one. What do you think the positive point is I want to make around a pet that relates to a pair of headphones? Come on, Gus. Listening, yes. Listening, right. That's a bit of a trick question because it's not strictly speaking, is it? But if you listen to James, so in the lead up to that sort of super passage in James 3 on the tongue, he makes this point around being swift to hear, slow to speak. Okay, Solomon, this theme is dotted throughout Proverbs, there's no doubt about it, it's in there, so he obviously thought it was an issue. And it's a really practical point, because although hearing is obviously not a form of talking, it is one of the best ways to ensure that what comes out of our mouth is worth hearing. And so that's why James says, be swift to hear, slow to speak. Because what is the inference? Swift to hear, slow to speak. What had he observed? He'd observed people who were the opposite, who were swift to speak, slow to hear, which is a relatable problem. It's a challenge. I can relate to it, and perhaps you can relate to it too. Sometimes we just like the sound of our own voice. Now, if we're introverted, we may not, be so prone to this after southern or suburban or something. We might want to go and hide. But in the right context, introverted or extrovert, doesn't matter. We will love the sound of our own voice and our own opinions and that sort of thing. And it's not necessarily a good thing because, if we're on the, just think about it. I'm sure we've all experienced this, right? We'll sort of externalise it for a second. Have you ever been in a conversation and the other person, they might let you speak for a bit, but it's quite evident they're not listening, and the opportunities you get to speak are just sort of to legitimise that they're having a conversation, and then bang, they just talk to you straight away, and so it goes on. Has anyone ever been in a situation where they feel like the other person is just not listening? And yeah, I have. I've probably been that person. I've probably been the victim of that person, and maybe probably most of us have as well. And the difficulty with this is if we don't listen, we don't learn. That's one thing. One of the hallmarks of wise people, again in the book of Proverbs that Solomon points out, is they take advice. Wise people seek out and take advice, okay, which is difficult to do because it's kind of humbling, taking advice from someone else. That it infers they know something you don't, and we don't love that. But yeah, to take advice, we've got to listen. The other problem with, I think, not listening is it kind of puts a strain on relationships because what does it infer if you're talking to me and I'm not listening and I just but what does that infer as to how I view myself relative to you? Think I'm humble? It infers I think I'm better than you, right? Now, I might not consciously think that, but that's what the signal is to you. And it's kind of hard to really have an even-handed, meaningful relationship with someone who, by their very behaviour, is inferring they think they're completely superior to you. Okay, so it is important we try and listen to other people. It's kind of a compliment, and it's a sign of respect if we listen to other people, even if maybe deep down, I don't know, we shouldn't, but we think we're better, whatever. Maybe we don't think they know that much. Maybe they do, if we would actually listen. So that is a precursor to good speech. Is just learn to listen. Very difficult to do though, which is why presumably James wrote that. Solomon, again, just briefly, just to sort of emphasise the point, Solomon brings this up quite specifically in the context of ecclesial activity. So the start of Ecclesiastes 5 is sort of around how we operate in the ecclesia and worship and that sort of thing. And he explicitly makes the point in that context, he says, got to be more ready to hear in those contexts than to just wax eloquent. And he calls it giving the sacrifice as fools. Someone who just loves to talk in the context of spiritual activities, kind of like I'm doing now, but I think I'm supposed to. But someone who just talk, it's like the sacrifice of fools. That's what Solomon says. Okay, second point. This is pretty broad, and this probably gets to the heart of why God did give us a tongue. We've talked about why it was risky, but as to why God did give us a tongue, what do you think He wants us to do with it broadly? Not play Lego. Lego. Say Lego or Lego? I'm from Victoria. I say Lego. No guesses? No one's going. Build each other. Who said that? Good. Another 10 out of 10. Yeah, build each other up, right? Build each other up, right? So there are many things we can say and do on a practical level that will build each other up. The phrase, It's sort of an old English word, but it's a nice word. It's a meaningful word that Paul uses in the Epistle to the Ephesians. Edifying, right? Again, he's talking about speech generally. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth. We've talked about that. But that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace to the hearing. So really nice, positive sort of summary phrase as to what we are meant to do with our tongues, why we do have a tongue, why it is ultimately a positive thing that we've got one, because we can build people up. And when you just think about, well, okay, what does that mean on a practical level? How can I build someone up? And it is often just simple things. It is saying thank you. Might be saying sorry. Paying someone a compliment, not flattery, that's a problem, but just saying something nice about another person, especially if maybe they're a little bit down, or that sort of thing, right? Who hasn't been on the receiving end of, perhaps when we are a little down, someone saying something really nice and constructive that's, from the heart, right? It's nice. It's a good thing, right? Our Lord Jesus Christ, he had positive, nice things to say to people who were downtrodden, who other people didn't want to have things to do with. That was one of his hallmarks. He loved talking to those people who other people didn't even want to know about. Right? He would see the positives, and he would talk to them about the good he saw in them, the potential he saw in them. That is edifying. That is the sort of speech that is going to bring the best out of people. Okay? And that is broadly what we are meant to do with our tongues. Telling someone we like them, maybe telling someone we love them in the right context. These are good things that we can do with our tongue. Sharing a word of wisdom, sharing a hard-earned lesson to someone who will listen. These are good, constructive things that we can do with our tongues. So broadly, edification, building up. If you think about what should I say, instead of worrying too much about what we shouldn't say, just think. There's that many opportunities to say positive, constructive, encouraging things to people. In a context like this, and in just about any context where there's other people around, why not? Right? Why not? It's free, and it's just such a healthy thing. That's what God does want us to do with our tongues. He wants us to edify. Okay. And the last positive point, it seems a little negative, but trust me, it's ultimately positive. I want to make is around. I suppose that's a picture of a lifeguard tower. It's sort of around warning, but I want to sort of put more the positive emphasis on warning, although in a way it's positive, I suppose. Is ultimately you can look at that as leading into preaching and sharing the good news of the gospel with other people. Okay, because in a sense, when we preach to someone, there is a bit of a warning there around. There's a good outcome out of your life long term and eternally, and there's a not so good outcome, and that's kind of at the essence of the truth. We are pursuing by God's grace eternal life, right? Because the alternative is not great; it's eternal death. Okay, but just stepping back, we'll talk about preaching in a second. But just generally, there is a positivity about the ability to use our tongues to potentially give someone some advice. Potentially, if we see someone who's struggling or maybe going down a path, we think, wow, I don't know if that's going to end well for them. Having the courage to intervene and just say, hey, what's this? Or why are you doing that? Or can I help with this? That sort of thing. Sometimes there is a role of warning. Now, one of the sort of, textbook examples of this concept of warning is Ezekiel 33, where Ezekiel is sort of likened or challenged by God to behave like a watchman. So, of course, a watchman in those days would be stationed on the wall of the city. They're watching the horizon for the potential invading armies, that sort of thing. And God says to Ezekiel, well, if you're in that situation, if the watchman's in that situation and they blow the trumpet, great, they've done their job, everybody can get ready and they've got a fighting chance. If they don't, because they're negligent or for whatever reason, well, blood is on their hands, as it were. And he says to Ezekiel, because evidently the message Ezekiel needed to give wasn't very easy to give, if you don't warn the people about what I'm asking you to warn them about, that's kind of how I would see you. So, and this is in some ways a role we have. when we see other people, or when we see people, we have an opportunity to preach to someone, we have an obligation to try and help them out, to try and share with them the good news of the gospel, or even if it's someone who's in the meeting or in the youth group or whatever. Sometimes we do need to have the courage to say, hey, I'm not sure if this is going to help you. Okay, difficult though that may be. Related to this, it is, and this is where I will talk about myself briefly. I was asked to, so I will. It is helpful not only to preach. I am a beneficiary of someone preaching to me. I was not brought up a Christadelphian. Okay, so I've immensely benefited from someone having the courage to warn me about what was coming in the world and all that sort of thing. And of course, I thought he was crazy at first, but years later, here I am. And one of the things that he did that really fits very neatly under the banner of what we're here to discuss tonight, being an example in word, is yes, all the negatives, yep, he sort of generally was pretty good in those respects. All the positives, yeah, he was pretty constructive. He was pretty nice to me, had nice things to say to me. But he also, when I didn't have such nice things to say to him about, oh, why do you believe in Noah's Ark? Are you crazy? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I really sort of got stuck into him. He had answers. He had very good answers because he had evidently taken the time to read his Bible, to, I don't know, back then it might have been Sunday night lectures, or, I don't know, Cumberland, we have Tuesday night class. It doesn't really matter how you learn, but going to youth group. But, we need to know why we believe what we believe. And it is immensely helpful to be able to talk to other people. And if they've got a challenging question about how on earth could you believe in Noah's Ark? Don't you know that we evolved from monkeys? Don't you know that the Bible is just written by some old priests who didn't know what they were talking about? It is incredibly helpful if we have answers for those things. Intellectually, we're not here to be intellectuals, but there is some level of, God has given us an intellect, and we need to give intellectually convincing answers as to why on earth we are here. Why do we believe the Bible? And if we're not sure, that's okay, but ask someone, challenge them, take your tough questions and ask someone. If they don't give you a good answer, ask someone else. But we need to know what we stand for and why, and because if we do, then it is just this gift we can give other people like me, to help them understand the gospel and why it is important and why it is actually credible. In a world that mocks and rails on the Bible and on God, it is good to be able to advocate for God by knowing what we're on about. So, I think that's something I'd encourage you to do. Understand what it is we believe, why. Don't just believe it because your friends do or mum and dad or whatever. Test it and be ready with an answer. And I love this quote from that respect. 1 Peter 3:15. Be ready always to give an answer, but that requires a bit of upfront effort. Let's be honest. We have to put the effort in to be able to have those answers up in our heads, or marked in our Bibles or whatever. But we need to be capable of giving people answers. It's a really, really helpful thing we can do for them. And I thought lucky last, I'll just round out and thought I'd show you what, in terms of the guy that brought me into the truth, that his name is Mason Linden. He's on the right. Has anyone ever met Mason? Probably down the back left, some of the less young people. Yeah. So not many people have met Mason. Anyway, that's the guy who through example in word, it helped me immensely because he did have answers and he did speak nicely and he didn't swear like a trooper like I did at that time. And it impressed me and it wore me down over years and years and years. And I was not looking for religion, I can tell you. And that guy sort of is, in a sense, I owe him the opportunity I've had to be in the truth. So, really quite an impactful individual in my life. Just interesting, the other guy there is not in the truth. He was sort of my best friend. We all were quite, had a lot to do with each other because we went through university together. I didn't always dress like that. That was a graduation ceremony. So that's the one and only time I think I've worn a cape in my life. But yeah, we all went through university together, and funnily enough, he was really quite interested in the truth in like year 11 and I thought he was crazy, and and then he lost interest, and I got interested. So it's just funny how things work out. You never know. Don't presume to know when someone's going to get interested or not interested in the truth, because it doesn't always play out the way you think. And the people you think would make good Christadelphians, who are we to judge? God's got different plans sometimes. So pretty much need to be ready to be a good example to everybody, because anybody can come into the truth. Really, anybody can. Okay, so I hope you found that helpful. A few challenges, a few negatives, but a few positives, and hopefully you can take that away, think about that, and take that into the week ahead and the example you present in the world around you. Thank you.